Hello and welcome to Micro Live. Tonight, computer games. We look at some of the alternatives to zapping those space invaders.
And word processors, what do they really offer to the absolute beginner?
From the city, Steven Arkell reports on how stockbrokers have been struggling with their newfound computer power.
And we tell the sad story of the Wingsail, a computer-controlled sail which has steered its inventor into troubled waters.
When you first look at game software, the impression you get is that every computer game is excitingly different. The packaging is great, it's glossy and grabby. Even the opening screens can look pretty inspiring. But when the game finally appears, you're usually hit by a sinking feeling of having seen it all before. That's because most games have developed from just a few classic themes. There's monster games like this one, where you run around bumping off critters or swallowing giant cherries. And there's the Space Invader theme, where you shoot at moving fleets of hostile aliens. Fairly boring. And then there's the more recent sports games. Well, sports games to me are perhaps the most appalling use of computers. Here it is. This is a decathlon. Well, doing a decathlon on a Commodore by wagging a joystick like this is really no substitute for going out and getting a spot of fresh air. Well, these sort of games might seem a bit of fun, but it's surprising how quickly even the most dedicated games addict gets bored with them.
Many people find the answer in adventure games. They have a vast following and can present a real mental challenge. An adventure game puts you into a whole new world. It sets you a series of problems which you've got to solve in order to complete some quest. This one is called The Pawn. It's got some very neat graphics, as you see, and it can also cope with some rather complicated instructions. For example, here I told it, go north, take off wristband and wait. Well, it's behaved as if it understood every word of it. We showed a version of this on the Atari ST last series, but there are now versions for the Amiga and even for the humble Commodore 64. Well, a good adventure game would keep you busy for days on end, be warned. You'd probably need to draw a map of the locations, because the geography, not to mention the strategy, can get pretty mind-boggling. Unfortunately, though, there are also some really naff adventure games around. You'd have more fun doing your tax returns. So, before you buy, read the reviews, or better still, ask an addict. The computer games that exercise the mind are often derived from what were originally board games. For example, an inexpensive bit of software can now be a mean opponent at chess. Or, if you're a Scrabble freak, you can now keep in trim on your own. Believe it or not, this Spectrum version has actually got a vocabulary of 11,000 words. 11,000! That's about the same as the average adult. Despite that, when I put in the word stalk earlier this afternoon, it didn't understand what I meant. Queried it. Oh well. The machine will play the parts of several opponents, if you like. Well, up here we've got Mac and Leslie. They're not really playing this. I'm playing against the computer. And it has all the traditional features. For example, you can swap letters if you like, or you can juggle them about like this. It's quite nice. And there are blanks and so on. Now let's enter a word. What can we have? There's an X. I've got one, I think. I don't know if I'm allowed this on television before 9 o'clock, but what about S-E-X? Can I get away with that? It accepts it. It would score 18. Oh, yes, I'll definitely have that. Yes, please. Right. Word is accepted. Fair enough. OK. Well, if that doesn't excite you, you can always leave it playing on its own while you pop down the pub. And, of course, now there's Trivial Pursuit. It's been taken to new heights with new questions. Well, new trivial questions, that is. They now include graphics and sound, but you are expected to be honest. Well, let's press this button and off we go. See what we get. It's going to be a science question. Well, that might be a help. What are hardened mollusk secretions? Oh, my giddy aunt. I've no idea, but, OK, supposing I said they're a form of tea bag. I don't know. Pearls, did you get it right? Yes, I say, of course I did. And I win the point. Well, of course, it's really supposed to be played in a group. But I can't help thinking that this version would appeal to computer freaks rather more than Trivial Pursuit fanatics. Well, so much for board games. What about a creative arcade game? Is there such a thing? Yes, there is. This pinball construction set lets you design your own pinball machine. And you can even change things. Well, first of all, you play it like a conventional pinball, if you remember these things. Press the button and you score it, the things bounce around, and you can steer it around with the paddles. But if you get fed up with that one, you can change things. I'll move on to an options screen here. Now, what should we have? We'll move one of these items over. pop that about there, I think, and perhaps one of these wedge shapes. Pick it up, put it over there. Right, let's try that. Oh, but first, I think I'll change some of the laws of nature. We'll move on to that which is supposed to represent the globe, the real world, and we can change, well, gravity if we like. Make it a bit stronger. Oh no, let's make it a bit lighter, see what happens. And elasticity, that's the bounce of the ball, so we'll change that a bit. Pull that down here. Right, quit that. Back into play mode, which is that icon there. There it is. Now let's try that. Oh, you see, well, gravity really has reduced there. I'm playing this on the moon or something. Let's see if I can catch that ball next time it comes down. Ah, got it. Great stuff. And that'll bounce around, should score quite well. So, even the old home micro can run good... Oh, shut up, will you? That's enough. Fine, thanks. Even the old home micro can run good games, but the newer machines, which have got more memory, better graphics, and faster processing, can handle even smarter games. Have a look at this one, Marble Madness on the Amiga. Now, basically, this is a very simple game. All I've got to do is steer this marble around, up and down these ramps and over these surfaces here. So there's nothing special about that, but what does make this game special is these graphics. Takes a bit of a steady hand, but... got it there. Not too difficult, but the graphics are terrific, real arcade quality. So, if you've never played a computer game, don't dismiss them. There are games for all mentalities. It's just that the good games are hidden behind a mass of crude shoot-'em-ups.
The age of sail lasted over 1,000 years. The wind costs nothing, and with sails properly set, a ship is capable of pulling the heaviest loads through the roughest seas. For 20 years, John Walker has relentlessly pursued the dream of restoring sails to cargo ships. Sails unlike any seen before. Finally, in June 1986, John fitted a ship with his first Wingsail, a sail operated not by man, but by a computer. The ship, the Ashington, is diesel-powered. The intention is that the Wingsail will cut her fuel consumption.
Well, it's an experimental installation, but we're hoping for 10%, and a full installation with another Wingsail on the forward end should produce over 20%.
Seen from above, the Wingsail is like 3 aircraft wings side-on, which can be rotated by small movements of a tail fin, rather like a weathercock. The 3 wing sections can be curved or feathered to give them the characteristics of a sail and thrust the ship forward. The critical factors are the rotation and feathering of the wing sails. These are decided by computer. The computer is housed in this box. From here, it can operate the sails by a system of hydraulic levers, which are connected back to the pumps in the computer housing. The computer knows from a vane and an anemometer on the wingsail both the wind angle and the wind speed. It also knows the angle of rotation of the wingsail from a sensor in the swiveling base. Walker used this model to convince skeptics that the wingsail would work. He emphasized its unique features, particularly the ability of the wings to curve either way to take advantage of the wind.
And we've got the wind at the moment coming in from the side of the ship. And when the flaps are deflected like that, the wind is deflected so and produces a thrust in that direction. It's a completely automatic system, so nearly as we can make it. Obviously, the captain has to decide whether or not he wants the thing working at all, and he also is the only person who could decide whether he wants a head thrust or a stern thrust. But anything more than that, the computer does completely by itself.
This circuit board contains the memory chip, called an EEPROM, which holds the program that controls the wingsail. The program was written by Frank Dale in a language called Forth. Frank is a bit of a Forth fanatic.
Forth is a language designed by a control engineer to facilitate the programming of control systems. And it has a whole range of unique features that belong only to Forth. It's like no other language. Lots of disparagers call it a write-only language because they claim that once written, you can't ever read it again, and a month later you don't know what you've written. But the beauty of Forth, it's extremely powerful, it's extremely compact. On this board, I've got a Forth interpreter, the Forth system, in a chip on there. I've got Forth on this system. I can write the program on these 3.5-inch discs, the source code. I can send it from this machine down the line to this machine where this interpreter compiles it into this chunk of memory. So the actual program that runs sits in this little square block, and there's the finished job. It goes onto the ship.
If the ingenuity of the technologists were all that were needed to get the Wingsail onto a ship, the Wingsail would have sailed long ago. As it is, its main obstacle has always been economics, starting with the difficulty of getting investors to back an unconventional project.
The trouble with innovative high technologies as far as city institutions are concerned is that there are no analysts, there's no form book, there's nothing to guide them, and so they feel terribly exposed. And so normally they tend to decide not to invest. The private investor who has brought us fundamentally as far as we've got has an entirely different attitude. He or she, an astonishing number of ladies among our shareholder list, say this is something which seems to be sensible, seems to be important, it ought to be able to proceed, and therefore I'm going to put some money into it.
But as the day of the launch approached, no investor could ignore the crucial fact that John's factory had no more firm orders and was lying idle. The only sign of activity was the men from Lloyd's Register of Shipping fitting a recorder into Wingsail's computer to see if the sea trials would vindicate John's claims. And as John Walker waited for the maiden voyage of the Wingsail, one thing was moving decisively against him. The price of oil was falling dramatically. Wingsail set sail on the 12th of June 1986. John and his wife watched as it moved into Southampton water on its way to trials in the Irish Sea.
I can't remember the last time I cried.
Perfect, eh?
Over the next month, the data recorders were to show that Wingsail did indeed save about 10% of the Ashington's fuel consumption. Another important benefit also became apparent. Wingsail's ability to exert thrust in the right direction at the right time meant that it could be used instead of expensive tugs when docking. But in the end, the price of oil fell so far and so fast that no other shipowner considered the fuel saving offered by the Wingsail worth paying for. John received no more orders, and 2 months after these pictures were taken, his company failed. Well, the Wingsail on the Ashington is still performing well and came through an encounter with Hurricane Charlie in the Bay of Biscay completely unscathed. Well, although John Walker had to lay off most of his staff in August, he's managed to start another venture, developing a yacht design based on the principles of the Wingsail. And we wish him good luck.
Oh. The problem with a typewriter is, well, when you're trying to edit the text after it's been committed to paper. Now, of course, ideally, the paper copy would be the final stage. And that, of course, is what the word processor is all about. You can make all your changes before you commit yourself.
Well, this is a BBC Micro running a package called WordWise. We've used the B because it lets us show the screen more clearly, but there are word processing packages with similar features for just about every micro on the market. Well, the first thing to note with any word processor is there are two ways of working. One to enter and edit the text, the straightforward typing, what I'm doing at the moment, and the other is for commands or instructions to tell the software what to do with the finished product. And we have a list of them here. We could save the text, we could print it out, etc., etc. As far as the computer's concerned, it's as if you're in two separate rooms. With this package, it's easy to see which room or mode you're in. You can switch or toggle between the two. The screen layout is quite different, and the various possibilities are selected from this menu here. But with some word processors, you have to type those commands in. Right, well, let's see how the word processor helps you write. I'll move into the writing mode, and that's one key depression on almost every system that you find. And as you can see, I'm working on a bit of a spoof letter here. I'll add a few more words in. I've been looking for a new job for 5 years and cannot find... Now, one of the things you find here, if I was typing here on an ordinary typewriter, the bell would ring to indicate the end of the line. I'd have to hit a character turn to go on to the next line. But the software does take care of this. Cannot find one, and it doesn't split the word, it puts the word completely on the next line. Now that's called word wrap, and it's a feature of all word processors. It means you can just go on typing without looking at the screen. But the word processor really comes into its own when you want to correct your mistakes. And the key that does this is the cursor, this little flashing bar here, the cursor. And it can be moved around using the arrow keys. So I have made a mistake up here. I just move the cursor over onto it, put it underneath it, and I want to replace that. So I go into overtype mode, I replace the F with an R, and it's simple as that. You'd never know that the F had ever been there. But word processors can do far more than just correct typing errors. You can make much more fundamental changes. Suppose I wanted to actually insert a word in here. I'll go down to this line here and position it. Now I'm going to go into insert mode. There's always two modes here, one to overtype what you've written and one to insert some new text. So I wish to apply for a job as a journalist. And as I'm typing this, automatically the words are being wrapped around and put on the next line down. Well, what about a major change? Perhaps I'd like to move the bottom paragraph in between the two first paragraphs, and that's fairly straightforward. I take the cursor down again, I put a marker in there, I put a marker at the end of the passage or text that I want to move, and then position the cursor again right on the line where I want it to be, and then move the text. And there I've got my letter fairly well structured. I could just as easily delete a paragraph or insert it twice or whatever. Now, if that was all the word processor did, it would still be worth having, but there's much, much more. For example, suppose you wanted to change a word every time it appeared. Now, in the last paragraph, there's two no's in there. Now, I might want to change that, so I go into the command mode, and I've got a search and replace here. Now, this says global or selective, G or S. Global means I replace every time the phrase appears, and selective means it will give me a choice to check each time. Well, I'm going to check, so I'll put an S. Please enter the search string. Well, I want to search for the times when no appears. That's no, and I type that one in there. And it's going to ask me what I'd like to replace it by. And I think I'd like to replace the no by am cog no sent with. That's a nice phrase to put in my letter. And am cognoscent with will replace no. Now, if I hit the key, it asks me here, do I want to replace the no here? And I am cognoscent with the difference between buffered and obfuscated. Sounds really quite pompous and should improve the letter no end. So I'll say yes to that. And down here, it's asking me, do I want to replace that no? Well, who work for you am cognoscent with doesn't make any sense, so I'll say no to that one. And there is my letter. It's looking quite reasonable. Of course, this is really only useful, this replacement, when you have a long letter with lots and lots of changes. And depending on the software you're using, well, there's plenty of other things I could actually do with this letter. But what you can't do is switch off the computer and come back tomorrow and expect that the letter will still be there. At the moment, the letter only exists in the computer's memory, right in there. So it must be put somewhere safe whilst the computer is switched off. In this case, we're going to put it onto disk. So I go back into the command mode. One, to say the text, it asks me to enter a file name. I'll call the file Mac. And the light comes on, and I can just hear it writing onto the disk, and that's saving the letter. Well, computers do go wrong, or you can even make a mistake yourself, so it's worth saving your work every 10 minutes or so. So this letter is ready to print. To make it easier to read, the software gives us 40 characters or 40 letters to the line. but it prints out at 80, and we can see what it looks like by pressing one key. And there it is. Now we can see exactly what the letter really looks like. Of course, we could alter the width to anything we want before printing it out.
Well, you can get used to the quirks of almost any word processing software, but what the finished letter looks like on paper depends on the sort of printer you buy. Basically, there are two sorts, daisy and dot. A daisy wheel contains a wheel like this, which has all the letters and the numbers on it. So it can give you perfect type. They're very reliable, these machines, and they're getting cheaper. This particular one, this Juki, costs about £250. But one problem can be this, the noise. It clatters quite unbearably. Well, I get shot at that, I think. That's all I can stand. And the other thing is they aren't really designed for pictures or graphs. So if you want a more versatile printer, then you'll need a dot matrix. Now, this type uses a series of dots to make up the letters. As you can see, the problem with this sort is the slightly speckled effect. There are dot matrix printers that get round this by double striking. They're called NLQ, or near letter quality, and they can look quite good. This particular one is a brother, and it costs only about £110. And here is the variety of things you can get from it. There are different widths, different boldnesses and so on, even italics. So, a resume of what you'll need to start word processing. If you've already got a computer, then you'll need a reasonably clear monitor. Well, a black and white one will cost upwards of about £80. You'll also need a disk system. This is quite an expensive setup here, but they start at about £100. You can just about get by with cassette, but it's terribly, terribly slow. Then you'll need a printer and, of course, the software itself. That's anything from about £5 to £100. Yes, it all adds up, but not to the prohibitive amount that it used to. And if you're starting with nothing, you could get a complete word processing system for as little as £400.
Next week, we'll be looking at one of those cheap systems and the more professional word processing equipment with Lynn McTaggart of Which Computer magazine. This coming Monday, the 27th of October, is the day the city changes the way it's been trading shares for almost 200 years. The new stock exchange is fully electronic, and for 2 years now, the city has been pumping money into computer technology to be ready. Computer Journalist of the Year, Steven Arkell, now reports on the city's greatest technology race.
Stockbrokers need a constant flow of information to give them a competitive edge over other dealers in the stock market. Machines like this were the state of the art 100 years ago, when Excel installed the very first financial network here in the City of London. The rules of the game have altered very little since then. But from the 27th of October, all that will change radically, and so will the technology that goes with it. It's called the Big Bang.
Hello, Weddles. They're not in 100 at the moment.
The winners in this new order will have one thing in common, computer power.
You dealing, Simon? You dealing, Burma?
BP, I'm doing here. I'll offer you 180 at 74. No, BP, I'm dealing in BP.
Because in the future, it will only be possible to keep up with the market with the help of the microprocessor. The right to deal on the stock exchange floor used to be bestowed by an exclusive committee of stock exchange members. In short, it was a monopoly, and the government didn't like it. So the stock exchange was forced to put its house in order. From October the 27th, any company with the right financial credentials from anywhere in the world can join the London Stock Exchange. The new rules will bring it into line with other trading centres like New York and allow it to become part of a worldwide share trading network. That means that British stockbrokers will not only have to compete with foreign brokers, but also with their technology. And the technology war has only just started.
Across these two dealing floors, we have approximately 650 dealing desks. We've invested in the region of £18 million in technology purely for the dealer desks alone.
We're currently on the verge of installing a far larger processor, the IBM Sierra, which will take up 3 or 4 times the area you now see before you, and it will enable us to move into areas such as 24-hour global trading so that we can trade on a 24-hour basis in London, Tokyo and New York.
But the city hasn't found getting the right hardware and software that easy. Stockbrokers Quilter Goodison had to abandon their Big Bang technology when they found that it wouldn't cope with the expected increases in trading volumes. And Hawker Vet has had problems getting enough lines off British Telecom to connect to the stock exchange computer. In fact, even the stock exchange itself hasn't exactly set a shining example.
The traded options situation, I think, received the most publicity. The situation essentially was where the traded options market was based on a system of networked IBM PCs. An additional PC was brought in to cope with increased volumes, and the testing procedures, I think, were found to be inadequate, such that when the fifth PC was connected to the network, the whole thing fell over.
Whatever the problems, from the 27th of October, stockbrokers will be communicating with the stock exchange electronically. This is the basic technology they will need to do a day's work.
Right in the middle, the voice communication system, push-button dialing, immediate contact to all dealers and clients through exchange lines, private wires. On the left-hand side of the desk, we have all the information services, one keyboard, any range of information services through any number of screens. The dealer would sit and watch this information, seeing price movements and details of any news in the market that would actually affect prices and market conditions. On the right-hand side of the desk, as soon as the dealer has done a deal, he inputs that straight into the dealing system. Details of the deal and every price movement automatically is sent straight through to the stock exchange systems. Then finally, on the right-hand side of the desk, a personal computer. This would be used for analytical purposes, decision support systems. You'll appreciate at the present time the screen's blank because obviously our software is somewhat confidential.
This screen would give a broker quick analysis on whether a particular share is worth buying. The software behind it is kept secret, as good computer analysis can give a broker a substantial edge over the competition. But Cambridge consultants agreed to show us an advanced system that they are now developing. Asked about buying 9,000 IBM shares, the program will give the broker a breakdown of IBM's recent performance, followed by an assessment of how difficult the deal is to execute. It supports its conclusion with reasons, in this case that because the order is a small one, and because there are sellers about, it is easy to do. Systems like this can easily be converted to deal by themselves, without any human intervention at all. Trading by computer, program trading as it is called, is already happening in New York and was partly responsible for the collapse in share prices this autumn. For example, the New York firm of Morgan Stanley already has a computer which trades by itself, without a broker even touching it. One way or another, it won't be long before program trading comes here to London. So the most immediate impact of the Big Bang will be to introduce foreign ways of doing things. Japanese brokers Nomura are set to shake up the city by exposing it to the expertise of their sister company, NCC, the largest software house in Japan. With a communications network which circles the world, Nomura will be able to deal around the clock from Tokyo. Competition like this will soon sort out which brokers know how to deal and which have a great deal to catch up on.
Last Saturday, when the city ran a full dress rehearsal for the Big Bang, 2 brokers were forced to send out messages saying they couldn't join in because their systems weren't working. Let's hope they do better next Monday. Until next Friday, good night.